В начале декабря он закрыл это дело, а через 3 дня меня вывезли в лес и отрубили кисти рук.
Hi, you are watching the Jonas channel. Today's video is about the case of Dimitri and Margarita Gracheva. Some of the details of this case are very graphic and violent, so viewer discretion is advised. This was one of the most widely discussed criminal cases in Russia, and after it people started really discussing changing the laws on how actually police has to react when the husband is becoming more and more violent towards his wife, and what it eventually can come to. If you will enjoy this video, please leave a like at the end, and let's begin. Dimitri and Rita Grachev met back in school, but they started dating in college, after Dimitri returned from military service. Such stories are not uncommon for the relatively small town of Serpukhov, located near Moscow. In 2012, the couple got married, and on December 14th, their first son was born. 2 years later, in May of 2014, Margarita gave birth to their second son. They lived in a rented apartment. Dmitri worked while simultaneously studying psychology, and Margarita took care of the house and children. In 2016, Margarita started working in the marketing department of one of the local media outlets, where her mother had worked as a journalist for many years. Overall, Dimitri and Rita's marriage was considered to be normal. They didn't have any outbursts of aggression between them. But over time, Dimitri started exerting more and more control over his wife. And he was a very jealous person. He knew the passwords to all of the Rita's social media accounts, and he was constantly monitoring all of her messages to her friends. When he was mad, he was becoming very tense. He never raised his voice, but the whole family was kind of afraid of him. Around mid-2017, unexpectedly for Rita, her husband cooled off towards her. He stopped paying attention to her, replying to conversations with short phrases. She said they started living like strangers, and Rita's attempts to improve their relationship were unsuccessful. Since summer of 2017, Dmitri simply avoided being at home. Rita tried to figure out what was happening, tried to please her husband, and even suspected that he had someone else, but nothing changed. In the end, in October of 2017, Rita announced that she would file for divorce. Dmitri replied that he didn't care. At first, the words about divorce remained just words. Dmitri and Rita continued to live together, but almost as strangers. But on October 29, 2017, Margarita received a message from her colleague at work. His name was Oleg, and Dmitri noticed this message on Rita's lock screen. In this message, Oleg was asking if Rita was at home. She picked up the phone, replied, and then deleted the conversation. On that same night, the violent argument sparkled between Rita and Dmitri. And during this conflict, he even tore up her passport so she wouldn't be able to leave and file for divorce on the next day. Obviously, their marriage at this point was falling apart. But in the morning, Dmitri just left to live with his mother. But he still continued visiting his son. For a while, everything was relatively calm, and the couple just lived separately. But on Friday, November 10th, 2017, early in the morning, Dmitri, having agreed with Margarita in advance, drove up to the house where she and their children lived in his car. They planned to take their sons to daycare, and Dmitri promised to take Margarita to the beauty salon after it, and then he wanted to go to work. After they dropped off the children at daycare, Dmitri locked the car doors, took Rita's phone, and drove off in an unknown direction. When Rita asked where they're going and why, Dmitri said, "Shut up, you annoy me." Then he took a kitchen knife that he hid in the car and threatened Rita with it. He drove her to a village in the suburbs and stopped the car in the woods. Dmitri demanded that she tell the truth about her affairs. Rita replied that there were no affairs, and Dmitri calmed down. Finding nothing on her phone, Dmitri drove his wife to the beauty salon. Already at the salon, Rita told a long-time employee and her friend about what had happened. She also told everything to her mother, with whom they were very close, and her mother turned to the police. A police officer spoke with Rita a few hours later, and then with Dmitri, but it led to nothing. This was no longer an ordinary situation of conflict in a married couple that police turn a blind eye to in many countries. Dmitri abducted Rita and threatened her, but the policeman did nothing, and he decided that the couple could resolve their issues themselves. Meanwhile, Dmitri's suspicions of his wife's infidelity flared up with renewed vigor. On November 12th, it was Rita's birthday. she turned 25. The whole family planned to celebrate this day and go to a restaurant. But the day before, Dimitri announced to everyone that Rita had cancelled the celebration because he found out messages from another man on her phone and left home. It was only then that relatives learned about the family conflict. Dimitri, who had not paid attention to his marriage for the past years, when realized that Rita might leave him for another man, became obsessed with her. He even started stalking her, both at work and at home. At some point, he even tracked down Rita's colleague, Oleg, and he met him near one of the city shopping centers. And he started a conversation. Oleg decided to show him his messages with Rita so Dmitri would calm down. And there was nothing compromising there. Because of it, Dmitri calmed down for some time, but still, his suspicions didn't go away completely. In mid-November, the children of the Grachev family fell ill. Dmitri came in the morning and left in the evening to take care of the sick children. But around November 25th, he packed his things and returned to the family. It seemed that everything had settled between the couple. But one evening, when Margarita was in the bathroom, Dmitri discovered that she had received a message from the same Oleg on her phone. Coming out of the bathroom, Margarita simply deleted the messages, saying nothing to her husband. Rita and her colleague had friendly relations. Their children were the same age and they went to the movies together. But she deleted the messages with him because it could upset Dmitri. After, Dmitri found out about a lie detector specialist. And on December 1st, 2017, he took his wife to Moscow for a lie detector test. Margarita decided to agree, hoping it could convince Dmitri of her honesty. After answering the specialist's questions, Dmitri was informed that the answers were not clear and that the expert needed time to analyze them. However, without waiting for the results, Dmitri began to prepare for revenge. He bought plastic straps and an axe in a hardware store, and various sizes of tourniquets and iodine bandages at pharmacy, and he put everything in the trunk of his car. As it later turned out, Dmitri also studied medical literature, interested in how to properly help victims with traumatic amputations, how to apply tourniquets and treat wounds, and how to deliver blows to reduce blood loss. At the same time, he began to study the criminal code, especially in terms of mitigating circumstances, so he was really preparing for his revenge. The results of the lie detector test were ready on December 6, and on the same day Grachev received them by email. He read them and called Rita, demanding to start divorce proceedings immediately. And he wanted her to do it quickly. For Rita, this was a shock. The results of the study were dubious. The paper stated that probably unreliable answers were given to questions regarding Rita's and Oleg's relationship. At the same time, Rita's negative answers to questions about cheating did not raise doubts with the expert. But this still was enough for Dmitri. It was as if he wanted confirmation of his suspicions. Early in the morning, on December 11th, Dmitri came to his wife's house again to take the children to daycare and Rita to work. But she didn't know that he was planning something sinister. Before driving Rita to work, they stopped by her mother's house for her things. And then, as before, Dmitri took her in an unknown direction. When asked where they're going, he ordered Rita to keep quiet, locked the car doors and accelerated. They stopped in the forest near the village of Panikova, where Dmitri had taken Rita before. Then he took her phone away. Dmitri inspected the phone for some time and then ordered her to get out of the car and take off her coat. When Rita refused, he forcefully pulled her out and tore off her clothing. Then he took out a package of plastic straps from the trunk and tied her hands with one of them, just above the wrists, so that she couldn't move. Then he inserted a medical tourniquet in Rita's mouth, tying the ends of it at the back of her head. After that, he used wide medical tourniquets to bind the upper part of her arms. Then he dragged Rita into the woods. She cried, screamed, and begged to be let go, but he didn't listen. Dragging her to a stump from a felled tree, Dmitri ordered her to kneel and place her hands on the stump. Rita refused, but then he threatened to hit her on the head. Rita squatted, and she put her hands as he instructed, and turned away. Dmitri struck her hands with the axe at least 10 times in total. When Rita tried to crawl away, he started hitting her with the axe on her left leg. And at the same time, he was repeating, "If you won't be mine, you will be disabled." Then he ordered her to get into the car. When Dmitri realized she couldn't, he grabbed her by the armpits and dragged her. There, he put Rita in the back seat and drove somewhere. Periodically, he checked her pulse and asked if she was still alive. All the way, Dimitri kept repeating the same words aloud. What adrenaline. He also said that when he would get out of prison, he will do to Rita's mother what he did to her. At 9:56 in the morning, Dimitri delivered Rita to the nearest hospital. After that, he went to the police and confessed to everything. At first, police officers didn't believe him, and he took the police to the scene of the incident. Officers found there one of Rita's hands and parts of another. The whole crime scene was a mess. Intact hand was urgently taken to the hospital because it could still be reattached. It was fortunate that the temperature that day was around -1 degree Celsius, which allowed the hand to remain preserved in the snow for several hours. Dimitri didn't suppose that it could be sewn back on. Otherwise, you can be sure that he would have thrown it away so it couldn't be found. Dimitri generally considered himself smarter than everyone else, so he beforehand studied all of the mitigating circumstances. He thought that the court will accept the fact that he himself took Rita to hospital, then went to police and confessed to everything, and he also thought that having 2 underage boys will also be a mitigating circumstance in the trial. He simply just couldn't resist the urge to ruin Rita's life when he understood that she wants to leave him. But he didn't want to go to jail for 10 or more years, and he hoped that because of his plan and preparation he will get just 5 or 7 years in prison, so there was a possibility of him leaving on parole in 3 or 4 years. Meanwhile, doctors were doing everything to save one of Rita's hands. At first, while the case didn't attract much attention, everything was going towards Dmitri's plan. But Rita's mother began to attract maximum attention from the media to the case. The public was outraged. Reports about what had happened were shown on TV channels, and then Dmitri's plan began to crack. The case was transferred from the local police department to higher authorities, and in addition to causing bodily harm, Dimitri was also charged with kidnapping and death threats. During interrogations, he was asking questions like a lawyer. It was clear that he had been preparing for his defense in court for a long time, and he was desperately trying to reject the kidnapping charges. On September 27, 2018, the city court, as part of the civil process, deprived Dimitri of his parental rights. At this hearing, he requested to reject this decision because, as he said, it could deprive him of mitigating circumstances in the trial. He was not at all concerned about losing his children. He was only scared that he had lost another, as he thought, get-out-of-jail-free card. During the investigation and in court, no evidence of infidelity was found. Margarita was faithful to her husband. The polygraph examination results could not be verified. The investigation only received conclusions, and all materials remained with the specialist, who disappeared immediately after the criminal case was opened. He simply moved out of the office where Grachev family visited him, and he now couldn't be found. Dmitri, who still was hoping to spend 5 years in prison, was sentenced by court to 14 years in a maximum security prison in November of 2018, and he also must pay Rita a large sum of money. Also, due to police inaction, the European Court of Human Rights obligated Russia to pay Rita 370,000 euros compensation. Doctors managed to restore Margarita's left hand partially. She can make some movements, but barely. Instead of her right hand, she acquired 2 artificial ones, a Russian one, which often breaks, and one from Germany, which is much better but doesn't work as good when it's very cold. Now, Rita lives happily in marriage with her new husband. Her common children with Dmitri still don't know what their father did. Rita told them that she had gotten into a car accident and Dmitri left for another city.